Good evening. Today's Wednesday, November 15th, 2023, 6:30 p.m. This is the Auburn Finance Committee. Tonight's meeting, we'll do go over the agenda in a moment, but we'll read the remote participation script first. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Finance Committee is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, it's 1-786-535-3211 with an access code of 991-599-357. While the public can join via computer, going to globalgotomeeting.com/join/991-599-357. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Auburn Cable Television. We believe we may have one member that is going to be remote this evening, so permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda participating remotely are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Ed Coleman?
Here.
Trevor Sansucci?
Here.
Michael Marshall?
Here.
Patrick Jones?
Here.
George Graham?
Here.
Stephen Consiglio?
Here.
Town officials and employees participating, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Town manager Ed Kaznovich?
Here.
CFO Town Accountant Karen Harnoy?
Here.
And Administrative Assistant Sharon Quickhouse.
Here.
So tonight's agenda, we have our call to order, which you just did. We're going to do our fiscal year 2025 budget kickoff meeting with department heads and division heads. And then we're going to review some transfers, do some minutes as the final. Mr. Kaznovich, if you...
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get started, I can't believe we're jumping into 2025 already.
Say that way.
Finished town meeting a few weeks ago, but it is the time of year that we put together our projections and our estimates based upon the final action of the fall town meeting. I'd like to thank the department heads, division heads for coming out tonight. I know their schedules are very busy, but this is an important piece of information that we present, which really kicks off the FY25 budget season. So with that, I'm going to go up to the podium, and I got about a 15-minute presentation. So FY25 brings with it some uncertainties, and I just want to go over some of the concerns that we have. The level of state aid, I know under the new Healy administration, there's an uncertainty as to what the expectation is in terms of Chapter 70 and unrestricted local aid. I can tell you that...
Excuse me, through the chair, I didn't get a copy of the presentation in my packet. Okay, I guess we found one. Thank you.
So I built in some conservative estimates, and as it applies to state aid, and I can get into that as we get deeper into the presentation. Certainly on the national and local level, we have some concerns about inflation and recession, although the numbers that were recently released would indicate that things are slowing down a little bit and the rate of inflation is trending now at about an annual rate of about 3.2%. It was up around 6.5%, so that's encouraging. Certainly the pending debt ceiling deadline of Friday, although the House has passed a measure that is going on to the Senate. We don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. And certainly the impact on the presidential election next fall is going to have an impact on federal and local economy. We continue to see escalating interest rates. We just got a short-term ban at about a net interest rate of about 4.5%. I can tell you that interest rate a year ago was below 2%. So we're paying higher short-term and long-term interest costs. We're seeing increased costs in our CIP items, primarily in vehicles and equipment. That's not reflective in the numbers that you see tonight. We're going to have to go over those in the coming weeks. Certainly, some adjustments will have to be made in order to meet the rising cost of equipment. Equipment availability is a problem too in getting trucks, ambulances, cruisers, and other departmental equipment. Six-wheel dumps and things of that nature are very difficult to get. There's a long waiting period for that. We continue to see the increased costs in utilities, motor vehicle costs, fuel costs, although is going down, still remains a volatile item in the budget. Special ed costs, they were up significantly last year. That's something that we are focused on in the upcoming year. And we're having a hard time getting drivers for snow and ice, which means we have to offer a higher rate of pay in order to keep our roads clear.
Mr. Kasnovich, before you get too far, are we sure that we're sharing your presentation with folks online? I'm not sure if that comes over automatically or not.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Kevin, can you ask Trevor if he's seeing this?
Trevor, I did ask him, I texted him, he's on the phone, so he's not seeing a screen, so he wouldn't be. He phoned in. I know Mike Marino's on there. Nick, I don't know if anybody.
You cannot see it on here.
Ken, thank you. Sorry, sir.
Okay. So when we look at our appropriations and our revenue, we're estimating at this point roughly 80.6 million in appropriations with a total revenue offset of 80.8 million, leaving a surplus of roughly 236,000. That assumes 100% utilization of 2.5. When we look at our revenue sources, we are estimating local receipts to be up by about 25,000. Cherry sheets, revenue up about 267,000. Tax levy up 1.8 million. Debt exclusion is going to go down by almost 1.3 million because this is the first year that we don't have to pay for the high school debt. We retired that in the year that we're in. And available funds is roughly down 2,275,000. That's primarily free cash. Our total revenue is down 1.4, once again driven by the retirement of the high school debt, as well as a reduction of appropriations of 1.6, also due to the retirement of high school debt. So total revenue growth is estimated to be just under 2%, negative 2%, and appropriations down by roughly the same. For FY25, we're estimating tax levy of 47,260,000. Once again, that utilizes 100% of Proper 2.5, and it earmarks about 1/10 of that for our capital improvement program. Our new growth, we're estimating at a conservative number of 475,000. Our excess levy would remain at FY24 levels of roughly 9.3 million. Our estimated levy utilization in 25 would be about 83.54% of 100%. That would leave an unused levy amount of about 16.46%. It raises 1.56 million outside the levy limit as a result of the debt exclusion vote, only for the middle school debt and interest. And once again, it retires our Auburn High School debt this year. When we look at our new growth, which includes the new value recently certified by DOR for FY '24, of 721,000. 5-year average is 761,881. Once again, we're using as an estimate 475. So there may be a little wiggle room there if we hold to the 5-year trend. Here's a breakdown of our FY '25 tax levy. Tax levy base of roughly 54.8 million. 2.5% is roughly 1,368,000. Added new growth is 475,000, leaving us with a taxable levy that we would tax at 47,263,000. Our levy limit is 56,572,000. That leaves a taxable percentage of 83.54% of our total levy. Here's an update of our excess levy utilization. The left-hand column represents in red the amount of taxation for that fiscal year. And as you see, from 2012 up to the current year, because we didn't tax to the max, we're building up our excess levy. It's a 14-year savings. This is something I presented at the annual town meeting and did at the fall, of about $67 million savings to our taxpayers since 2012. Our cherry sheet state aid, we're building in a 1.5% increase from the current FY '24. The 5-year average, although, is 3.55%. We're being conservative at 1.50%, not knowing how much revenue is going to be recommended in the governor's budget and ultimately by the House Ways and Means. And the unknown, one of the big uncertainties is the unknown Chapter 70 distribution, but I believe our school enrollment is going down from the current fiscal year, so that could result in a less amount of Chapter 70. When we look at our available funds, we have a reduction over the current year of 25,000 in overlay surplus. We have a reduction of free cash that was recently voted at town meeting of 1.252 million. A reduction in our premium of bond receipts. We use that for one-time capital expense for some cruisers and other one-time capital expense in FY '24. And we have a reduction in sewer retained earnings of 521,000 that was earmarked in the current fiscal year. Here is a list of our available funds. I'm not going to go through this, but certainly if you look at FY '24 to FY '25, you're going to see the change in balance. Our local receipts, for the most part, are estimated to be what we got approved on the FY '24 recap. Although it increases our motor vehicle excise by 50,000, we did reduce that because of the UAW strike in the current fiscal year. There are some hints of settlement. Hopefully that will result in some positive growth. We increased solid waste. The Board of Selectmen just voted at their meeting Monday night an increase in solid waste fee as a result of a presentation, a recommendation that came out of the Solid Waste Committee as a result of increased cost under our new contract. It reduces the payment in lieu of taxes by about 46,000. There was a doubling up in FY '24 because of a late payment by the Housing Authority, and it level funds all other local estimated receipts. Here is a FY '24 versus FY '25, as you can see, it's pretty consistent. When we look at our total revenue of $80,827,087, it's down 1.80% over FY '24, decrease of $1,410,226. On the expense side, we began to build our budget based upon the final action of town meeting at the end of October. This budget indexes all wage-related accounts by roughly $1,050,000 based upon a 2.5% index of all current wages. At that level, that would absorb about 70, just shy of 80% of our total allowable 2.5. Payroll to all department heads will be calculated using a 52.2 week index. Once again, our wages are indexed at 2.5% for presentation purposes only. Our estimates for solid waste are up an estimated 6% based upon our contractual agreement. That would include solid waste pickup as collection as well as disposal. This budget estimates our employee benefits and retirement blended at a 6% increase. Our budget provides for all debt and interest payments, including the most recent ban approved last Monday night at $1,656,000. It also provides for $132,000 for our CIP. That's 1/10 of 2.5 for our capital improvement program. That level of taxation or level of funding will go up to $1,717,000. There is no recommendation for OPEB, as well as there's no recommendation for OPEB, and we'll consider that hopefully through certification of free cash at the fall town meeting. This budget level funds snow and ice at 2024 levels. Certainly, that's an area we're going to have to look at as a result of a difficulty getting drivers to remove snow for the current year. And it level funds Medicaid receipts at an amended amount at the fall town meeting of $140,000. It level funds our cherry sheet assessments and offsets at 24 level. The budget incorporates our adopted financial policies. This would be year 12. There is no earmark for stabilization. It does provide for an increase, an estimated increase for our Bay Path assessment at 2.5%. It may be less, it may be higher based upon enrollment numbers, which we don't have yet. And it level funds Norfolk Agricultural School assessment. I'm not going to go through these projected recommendations at this point in time. I think I've highlighted those during the presentation. When we look at all the appropriations, including capital and assessments, we're looking at a projected budget of $80,590,605.14. That's 2.10% less than we currently are at in FY '24. That's a decrease of $1,646,707, leaving a projected surplus of $236,482. If we tax at the full 100% of 2.5. In summary, total appropriations over revenue, there's our $236,482. And some of the budget priorities that were conveyed to us by the Board of Selectmen, They are asking us to look at additional seasonal help for the parks and cemetery. They would like us to consider some website upgrades to make navigation and transparency more easily available for our residents. We'll continue to look at our salary analysis for bylaw employees. I know there are some adjustments before you tonight that address some of those positions that we said we were going to bring to you once we got through town meeting. We may have to look to increase snow and ice as a result of increased costs, whether it's labor or whether it's for sand and salt. Those costs continue to rise. We've been asked to take a look at the library staffing to make sure it's adequate to meet the needs of the Auburn Public Library. We've been asked to look at potential grants for small businesses that would allow for some relief. We implemented a sidewalk program at the fall town meeting that appropriated approximately $150,000 for FY24. The Board of Selectmen asked us to look at continuing that program perpetually. And we, like I said, we do not have a recommendation for OPEB stabilization, but the Board of Selectmen would like us to earmark a portion of free cash on an ongoing basis for those two liabilities. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time if you should have any.
Anybody have any questions relative to the presentation?
So, Mr. Chairman, a timeline has been provided in the packet. We will do our best to adhere to that timeline and bring to you any significant changes that may occur either on the revenue or the expense side that may deviate from what we have projected here. We know this is not going to be the final budget. It never is. We do have some challenges on the labor side. The teachers are currently negotiating. We know that's going to have an impact on the budget. To what extent, we don't know, but that could be pretty significant.
And just typically, you start out at 2.5, correct? And then we sort of work our way back.
So when I typically submit the budget mod, it's utilization of all of 2.5. Certainly, I know there are costs in here such as CIP that we have not adjusted yet. That's going to reduce that amount or rely on borrowing funds to cover that difference. We just don't know yet. We're trying to minimize the amount of money that we're borrowing due to the high cost of borrowing money. To the extent that we can, we try to minimize the level of borrowing, and that's why we add roughly 1/10 to 2.5. So ultimately, as time goes on, we rely less on bond proceeds and rely more on tax levy to fund our capital needs.
Through the chair.
Sure.
I have two quick questions. The first is, so the departments are level funded. That includes any adjustments that were made at fall town meeting? New positions or any other?
So it level funds at the adjusted budget at the fall town meeting and indexes the budgets by roughly 2.5% for wage considerations.
And then my other question is, and I feel like I've never actually asked this, and I've always been curious. When we talk about the unused levy, like, that's gone forever, right? Like, when we don't tax it this year, is that gone? Or could we theoretically increase our taxes by more than 2.5% this year by using unused?
Correct. Yes, the excess levy would allow us to exceed 2.5 if we had to, if we wanted to.
That's all. I've just never actually known the answer to that question, so thank you.
Anybody else? So the timeline looks basically for us, we typically see the individual budgets,
In February. So they're doing roughly the first week of January. We begin our discussions with the departments at that time. Hopefully put all together, make a presentation to the board, who forwards the budget to the finance committee, and then we typically begin mid-February, mid to late February. And once again, new administration, we know that their release of their estimates were late last year. Hopefully, they'll be more timely and get them out at the end of January, when typically we get our first look at those numbers. So that's a driving factor of when we can get you the budget as well. So to the extent that we can, if those numbers are not released, sometimes we can read the tea leaves and make some projections, but, typically at the annual MMA conference, there's a release of an indication of what the expectation could be. So I want to thank the department heads and division heads for coming out again tonight, and I'd be happy to answer. I don't know if they have any questions relative to the process, but be happy to answer any questions they may have as well.
anybody else has any questions? Otherwise, thank you. Appreciate everybody coming out this evening. Just a quick question, relative, in my years, the capital improvement plan typically ends up being sort of we talk a lot at the individual budgets, departments about some of the minutia of their individual budgets, but the capital improvement plan ends up being kind of a bigger chunk that sort of just gets, I won't say glossed over, because I know a lot of thought goes into it in planning, but can there be some more discussion with this committee relative to how that comes to be, as opposed to just individual approvals as we move along? As far as the process goes, I don't know really exactly how I'm trying to phrase this.
So, I mean, we have extensive discussions about capital, because we're not only looking at FY '29, we're looking at the 5-year window, because those numbers are, especially in today's economy, are changing. They're increasing, they're not decreasing, so we have to make some adjustments. I'd be happy to set aside a meeting if the finance committee wants, strictly on capital, if you want to have that discussion. But we provide the information, we give the finance committee an opportunity to have the capital discussion with the department heads when they come in and present their operating budget. I'll leave that up to the finance committee, how they want to handle that.
I was actually just going to bring that up. I think that from a big picture perspective, it might be prudent maybe not to hold an only meeting, but as we take each department's budget, that we set aside 20 or 25 minutes and just look at the capital budget. I make that suggestion because when you're looking at an individual budget and you're flipping back and forth from the operational budget to it, you get one perspective on it. But if you've got items in there that could be linked together or could be joined together, it might be more prudent to take them all as one budget so that we can see that sometimes the eyes look at something differently when it's presented differently. So I'd be in favor of having us move forward with having the budget in itself. We'd still go back and refer to it when we go through the departments, but I think it would be prudent to do it as one budget so we understand it globally. Just a suggestion.
Steve?
I went to that conference last week or 2 weeks ago, and one of the ideas, well, first of all, every town has totally different finance committees, and we were actually on the low end with 5. But one of the ideas that they had is having a liaison on the committee to the departments, so that there was always somebody from the board that was in regular contact with the department heads, so there were no surprises, questions, and that kind of thing. That's more of a structural, bigger picture stuff. I learned a lot at that thing, but that was one approach to sort of, instead of having a meeting, we each become sort of integrated into the creating the budget or I'm not sure creating is the right word, because we're just a witness anyway. But, so that when other board members have questions, you don't necessarily have to bother the departments. Somebody on the board will know the answers.
Yeah, I think we have to be cognizant of the charter definition and what the role of the finance committee is, and certainly we don't want to, we don't want to overstep your authority or your purpose. So, we can be very flexible. I think we should think this through and come up with something that makes sense. So I think in the past, I think we tried to blend it in, so for the convenience of the department, they're not coming back multiple times. So they're here to discuss their budget. A lot of times, the capital relates to the operational side of the budget, and they fit together well. So there's a cause and effect, not only on the operational side, but on the capital side. So I would prefer, and I understand the global concept and how that all fits together. And maybe we can tie it in at the end after you hear from all of the departments as it relates to their operating budget. But my suggestion would be we expand the discussion of capital when you bring the department in. So there's an understanding that there's that, that further explanation of their capital requirements.
To the chair, to your point, I understand that we have an ordinance and we have parameters that guide us within our role. But I do think sometimes when you have, you're absolutely right to your point that when we have the department head, it's a full picture. But I might take a different perspective if I see that there's 18 trucks being ordered. But if I'm piecemealing it through the individual department meetings, I'm not maybe capturing that, oh my God, we don't have one for this department or one for that department or one for this department. We're really ordering 18 trucks over 4 years. And I think that's what I'm trying to capture. And you're right, you want to take advantage. Everybody's time is very delicate and very important. And so therefore we want to do as much of it as we can while we have the department head here. It's just a matter of isolating it so that you can see it all in how it works. If you have $500,000 that you're trying to invest over or purchase over a period of 5 or 7 years, it makes a difference when you have 20 in 1 year. And that's not even counting the bigger programs like the large buildings and stuff that are going to be going up. So again, thank you.
Again, I think that's what Patrick's saying is what I was trying to say is we take a little bit extra time looking at that CIP when the individual departments are here and look out for what the long-range plan is, because I think historically, we've sort of just approved that given year, which doesn't really take into effect what your master plan is for. A good example is vehicles and fleet to look out just a little further, just so we can have a little bit of the coming year, know where we're going.
And actually, while I have an audience, I'll point out that the other thing that will afford is that everybody should realize that when you have a CIP budget, the most you can go out on it is 2, possibly 3 years. We plan for 5 or 6. We might talk 8 because we know that there's large structures or things that have to happen. But a real capital improvement plan can only be good for 2 or 3 years. As Mr. Kastanovich has pointed out, there's bans, there's bonds, there's interest rates, there's borrowing. We could want to do this in 3 years, but then all of a sudden this happens on this end of town, or we have something that's unforeseen. So like the budgets themselves, a CIP is constantly changing and it's a work in progress. So the fact that we revisit it every year enables us to keep on top of that so that we're doing what we have to when we do it. So.
Through the chair.
Chief.
Mr. Jones brings up an excellent point. And I think what would be helpful, and I guess didn't think about it in this perspective until it was brought up tonight, but you're right, in the 12 years that I've been the chief, when I come before the finance committee to talk about the capital budget, we're only talking about that 1 year. As I was just sitting there thinking about it, I've never actually presented like what our 5-year capital plan looks like. And in the fire rescue department specifically, although Mr. Jones is completely correct that, and this year is a perfect example of it, a realistic capital plan is only good for that 3-4 year period. But realistically within the fire rescue department, we have a 20-year capital plan. Now, that 20-year capital plan is built out because many of the trucks that we keep for 15 to 20 years. So it's easier to look at it when you're looking at this big list to say, okay, something that we buy today is going out of service 20 years from now. But realistically, we know that there's going to be a lot of movement within that 20-year period. And this is a perfect example. I think in our 5-year capital plan, all but 2 items were completely rearranged on our capital plan because other priorities came up, grant opportunities, other things happened. So I think, at a minimum, I guess what the committee is looking for is, maybe this, maybe every year when we come in, we just kind of recap of what the 5-year plan is and how we, kind of what the thought process is, because it is very difficult to look at that one specific year and really get a global sense of how a fleet rotation works specifically, whether it's with police, fire, DPW, anybody with large fleets. In order to really understand how those purchases make sense on an annual basis, you really have to look at the snapshot of the lifetime of that piece of equipment and how it rotates. So my suggestion would be that on an annual basis, when we come in for the budget, instead of looking at the 1 year, let's just recap the 5-year plan as it sits and just kind of talk about the philosophy that way.
Thank you.
And with that, you need to appreciate too that a lot of these things we don't know about as board members or you as employees. You can look at energy, which is something we've been dealing with for 3 to 5 years. You can look at COVID. So a lot of things that might appear to be great because they're there and they're on the plan, all of a sudden we get blindsided because now all of a sudden energy costs have doubled. So it's definitely merited on paper and it can be rearranged, but I just want to point out the importance of having as much to work with and just making sure that we're eyeing it at the proper time.
A perfect example of how things change pretty quickly, and I know I'm going to refer back to the chief, but pre-COVID, if we placed an order for an ambulance, we got it within 9 months. That same ambulance today is 3 years. So it changes the whole capital plan. It requires us to accelerate things, to place the order well in advance, knowing that a delivery date is 3 years down the road. And sometimes that kind of throws a monkey wrench into the whole plan, but that's something we have to deal with on a annual basis. So that's why you'll see at times a reshuffling of the deck, and sometimes the capital plan looks somewhat different because we have to reprioritize and take all those conditions into consideration.
Any other further questions? Apologize, everybody, for making that discussion go a little longer and get home to dinner and families. But thank you. I think we just have some transfers left. If you don't have any transfers, feel free to make your way home if you don't need to be here.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we'll do the transfers next. Okay, first transfers request is from the fire department, the firefighter salary account. Present balance $379,822.51. Amount requested $2,000. That transfer request is going to the repair account. The reason stated, cost escalation from equipment testing. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's part of the issue, really the large issue that's driving this transfer is our equipment repair account is typically not designed for fleet repairs. That budget solely lies within the DPW. But this year, when we sent the tower truck out for its annual testing, we had a rather large repair bill on that vehicle that was close to $9,000. And at the time, the DPW fleet maintenance was not in a good position because they were waiting on some transfers. So we absorbed that bill through our equipment repair account, which it's normally not designed. It's designed for testing and all of those things. Although we did see an escalation in the testing this year, the real issue that sort of drove that that chunk was that repair bill that we took from our budget. So we have about, I think the balance in that account is, I think, $56 at this point. So I'm just looking to put $2,000 in there. That is, you know, what comes out of that account moving forward is preventative maintenance stuff. If we have small repairs, we'll take it out of there. But my intent between now and June 30th is to just feed that as I need it. So I'm making a request for 2,000 just so we have some wiggle room in there. You know, I'll be back if we need more, but I'm just going to feed it a small amount at a time between now and June 30th in case.
Any questions?
Motion to approve?
A motion and a second. We're going to do a roll call because I believe we may still have Trevor online. Ed Coleman?
Yes.
Trevor Santucci? Trevor, you still with us? Possibly not. Michael?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, next request comes from the Parks Department. Name of the account for field maintenance, amount requested, $25 to go to the education and conferences, transfer to cover the cost of a hoisting license class. Any questions?
Motion to approve? Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor, even though we don't have Trevor, he was here originally, so I'm gonna still go through. Ed?
Yes.
Trevor? Michael?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Steve? And chair votes yes.
Through the chair, I'd like to suggest of the next 7 transfers, 6 of them belong to the same account. So I'm wondering if we can take 3 on its own and then do the other 6 as one vote.
Second.
Okay, so just to be clear, you want to put all the ones coming from salary wage into one? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 into one? Okay, so we have a motion to take those 6 items as one. And do we have a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Are we able to, since Trevor's?
Trevor dropped.
Do I just keep doing the roll call? Okay, we'll stick with what we've been doing. Ed?
Yes.
Trevor? Michael?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Stephen? And chair votes yes. Okay, so coming from the finance town manager, coming from the salary wage account, amount requested $4,230 going to the assistant town accountant. It is, reason given, a 1% increase plus pay grade increase. The next one from salary wage reserve, $1,782.74 going to the assistant treasurer / collector. Reason given, also 1% increase plus pay grade increase. Skipping that one. Salary wage reserve, the amount requested, $4,230. That one is going to the assistant assessor / data collector, 1% increase plus pay grade increase. Next one, salary wage reserve, amount requested $4,702. This one's going to the assessor's salary for a 1% increase plus pay grade increase. Salary wage reserve, amount requested $1,845, going to the town manager clerical account. Reason given, 1% increase plus pay grade increase. And the 6-1 salary wage reserve, the amount requested $4,433, going to the treasurer / collector salary. Also a 1% increase plus pay grade increase. Just tell me, do you want to
Sure,
what these mean before we?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I think I put this out there, not only to the Finance Committee, but to the Board of Selectmen, that a handful of transfers we were going to bring in after the final town meeting in October. These requests were made as part of the original FY24 request, at which time I said, I'm not in a position to make a recommendation. I want to do an analysis of pay as it relates to several comps, and we did that. I could tell you that in some cases, there are clerical positions making more than our assistants, and that it's not right. It shouldn't be that way. And our treasurer and assessor, we did comps on them, and we know that recent ads would put us at risk of losing some critical people here. So we recognize the importance that we had to make this. I want to thank them for being patient and allowing us to do this, and I know it's created some frustration. But we were committed to doing this, and this puts them in line. It's not at the top, it's at the mid-range of comparable communities that we surveyed. So that's the reason for these adjustments, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second. Motion is second. Take the roll call. Ed?
Yes.
Trevor? Michael?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Yes.
And chair votes yes as well. Next one we'll take is the treasurer collector, coming from the treasurer collector clerical account. Amount requested $2,447.26, going to the assistant treasurer collector account. Again, this one is a 1% increase plus pay grade increase.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion is second. Take the roll. Ed?
Yes.
Trevor? Michael?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
And chair votes yes as well. Final one. This one's coming from the finance/town manager. Name of the account is the reserve fund. The amount requested $35,000. Present balance in that account, $275,000. Going to the unemployment account. Reason given, unanticipated increase in unemployment costs for FY 2024. These are costs estimated through 12/31/23. So manager?
So, Mr. Chairman, in discussions with Karen, who examined level of expense through the current fiscal year, last year we spent 24,000?
Just under 16,000.
Just under 16,000. And we're well over that for this year. So this is a discussion, the bulk of this is school-related. Without knowing the reasons these individuals were let go, we'll have a discussion with the school department. But we do have invoices that we're required to pay as a result of a benefit we've been paying some people who are currently unemployed. We're just doing a 3-month gap here, hoping that these individuals will get reemployed and they'll fall off our unemployment comp, but we don't want to cover the full year, hoping that this cost is going to go down.
Questions? Patrick?
Through the chair, don't these people usually get laid off or let go sometime in June or May? So now coming into the end of the year, wouldn't they have applied at other school systems or made other decisions? I mean, the school year doesn't end until September or so they usually don't find out, in the middle of July or August that they're not going to be unemployed. So I'm just thinking of the timing of when we did the budget versus the diminishing amount of money that's going on. Would this have not been foreseen?
So certainly it wasn't foreseen by us, otherwise we would have made an adjustment at the fall town meeting. So that being said, we're gonna have these, further discussion with the schools and examine the town's obligation of that share. And we'll understand a little bit better when they were served and when the obligation, it seemed pretty consistent since the summer, wasn't it, Karen?
Yeah, it took an increase in August. Though I did notice, because I looked at all of the bills, and there was a teacher that was not renewed that came on either in September or October, so they didn't file until that time. But then it went all the way back till when they got their last pay for the
Well, that was my
fiscal
point,
year
which was probably in the
24.
late spring, right?
No, actually, I think they were notified in June that they were
But
not.
they're getting
they're gonna-
paid through the summer, so it probably
Right.
doesn't hit until September. That's when is that when it ballooned, Karen?
But actually, it was for August is when it started. 13,000, September was 12, October was 13. But actually, there's a small number of individuals, there's only 3 that make up the amount that's on here from the school.
No, I was just going to say through the chair, they do get paid through the summer. I mean, it's work that they've completed prior to June 30th, but it's gauged over the summer so that they would have been receiving a paycheck. So they probably wouldn't have applied, but usually by the last day of school, they'll know whether they're going to be renewed. And we did have some non-renewals that we felt just didn't fit appropriately. There were new hires that didn't maybe fit, so they weren't renewed. But we have also been diligently working with the town manager's office and Dory as well to try to go after like anybody who's, applying for unemployment. We've had some fraudulent claims that we've tried to stay close in contact with those. And also just checking in on the people that to making sure it's an appropriate claim. And we do fill out the forms and stuff, so we try to stay on top of it as much as possible.
I guess for me, I know that, we have some municipalities that have balloon payment in the spring and the summer, so it's a sort of a complex formula, which why I'm sort of digging to understand. I would have thought that if they finished up in March, even if they got paid through, or if they finished up, I'm sorry, in May, not March, and got paid through, that they're not working anymore, so they would be eligible for unemployment in June and July. So these people that were not accepted back, for the lack of a better word, received pay through the end of August. Okay.
Just for my own education purposes, because I don't really recall in my time here, we're having sort of an unemployment number, at least not a large one that sort of stuck out like this, but how does it work for municipalities? So a municipal worker is let go or not renewed. They file through the state for unemployment benefits, but then the municipality has to pay all of that salary back? Or is it a percentage? Is it compared to the private sector where you almost have like an unemployment insurance, correct?
No, yeah, they get a percentage of their pay. It's capped. Some pay a premium or a rate. We pay the percentage. So, where was I going with this? So I can tell you, when you look at the 5-year history of this, we haven't paid over $50,000 over the 5 years. So this is kind of an anomaly. During COVID, and I almost had a heart attack, we were getting so many fraudulent claims. 1 month's invoice was $22,000. And when you extrapolate that out over a 12-month period, it was like $260,000 for unemployment comp. We finally got a credit for all of that, and when the dust really settled, we only paid like $50,000 for the year, so it wasn't that much. So there was no reason to believe that we were expecting this type of balloon, especially at a time when unemployment is low. So it came to us as a surprise. So we need to dissect this and find out.
And I think it's important to mention to the board that, because if you look in the actual budget presentation that they do, they actually did a presentation of benefits, and it was like 12 plus million. And so it's important to recognize that even though the school has a large budget, that it's considered a global expense, so it falls back on the municipality. It doesn't come out of the school budget because it's considered a benefit.
Yeah, we do charge back through an
You do? Okay.
indirect cost.
I'm not sure I understand this correctly, but I was under the impression that teachers would sign a contract for a year, and then when the year would up, I'm surprised you could collect after the year was up, because you were only hired for the year. Or am I misunderstanding?
No, these are not individual employment contracts. This is a union contract, which was for a 3-year term. So there are some allowances for individual employment contracts. These situations are not, yeah.
they're entitled to unemployment. I think what I was trying to drive at was I was trying to understand where the break in service and pay as it relates to when they can collect and become eligible, because they will have the normal 26 weeks or so for it. So I hope that a lot of them can get employed by January, or we'll be looking at another transfer in January.
I just don't know how DET looks at that situation. They're paid over the summer, because that's the way this system is set up. They may be recognized as unemployed July 1 and would be eligible for, they just spread their pay out over a year, because that's the way they chose to do it.
So they're getting paid for the same period of time, just to repeat, to understand. They're working 9 months, but some get paid within that 9 months, and others decide to get their pay throughout the whole year. So they're getting a little bit less over a longer period of time.
Yeah. So under that scenario, the DET may say, well, they recognize their unemployment start date is July 1, or whenever the school year ends.
Any other questions relative to the transfer? Do we have a motion? Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. Call the roll. Ed?
Yes.
Trevor? Michael?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes. We was provided some minutes. If there's no questions on the minutes, we'll just consider them as adopted. Any other further questions? So we probably, we'll wait to hear if there's any additional meetings needed relative to any transfers. And then our big season starts in the spring.
If I could, through the chair, there actually was an inquiry about whether we would have a December meeting, and I was hoping that we would, because we also have to come back with the 1% increases for the other employees than the ones that were brought here tonight. Potentially December 13th on a Wednesday, if that would work.
We want to check real quick while we get,
It's not a good date for me. I'll be in New York, but there's still 6 other committee members.
yeah, why don't we do that? We'll go with that date for now.
You can join us remotely, Patrick.
We could.
Physically.
Okay, if there's no other questions, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? We'll do. Very good.